Huma, Yahweh, Weafutsu Oyeveaka, Mianusa Misaneaka Mifaneaka. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee.
Shalom everyone, and welcome to Into All Truth. May the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come. In the name of Yahusha. Family, thank you for donations, and please pick up Into All Truth, the Moed Appointed Times calendar, or try to eat life fast to keep the Hebraic lifestyle. In the name.
What? I mean, Shem, I'm just really trying to holler at you for real, for real. Holler at me for what? You said what? Holler at me for what? I mean, you're pretty. You got a nice smile. I love your personality. That's cute.
Ooh, child. Today we go and talk about the glory of the excellency of the Chaldeans. Ooh, child. And Funkadelic always says what? Yow. Which yow means yow. And so let's get into this. So I am doing this video in aid of trying to bring one nation under a group, as this video, this album basically is trying to do from Funkadelic. And so you're going to see, as usual, from Reverse Pangea, that it is not either we're from this side or that side, Africa, but it's both and. So let's get into it. The glory of the excellency of the Shemitic Chaldeans, who chose to remain Egyptian, and the 10 tribes in the United States, who never ever in the history of the Northern Kingdom ever followed the law of Torah and worshipped Yahuwah. Yes, they are definitely bad. They're definitely a bad one. We're always seeing them portraying themselves in feathers as these Indians and as Egypt. They say they're Moors. They say they're the Indians. They say they're Khan. They say they're all of these things. These are them in Iran and Iraq. Well, here is Nimrod. And Nimrod, as you will remember, had all of the Shemites in his kingdom, and he was in their land. And even Esau slayed Nimrod and so obtained his kingdom. So Esau is now associated with the leopard and all of the things that the Chaldeans are associated with, because Esau is also a Shemite. And so when we hear our Shemitic brothers and indigenous, quote, Black Americans saying these things, in truth, they are right, because what did Yah say to Abraham? He said to leave your father's house. And so he went down to the land of Canaan. And down is up, because the map is upside down. So he went down north from the south and headed towards the land of Canaan. And it was called that because the Canaanites had stolen it. But he headed towards what we call Africa today and Egypt, because the land of Shem is to the south thereof. So this was the face of Asia, Persia, Pan-Asia, right? The face of Asia, otherwise known as the third Ethiopia, all right? So this is where the Chaldeans were, in the south. Look up there, Ham's land, covering all of America as Edom edges in from Europe in the east. There, of course, was the Medo-Persian captivity. And, of course, the evidence of who the people are in wall reliefs and paintings and sculptures and so on. So you really clearly see that these are Black people. The Shemitic people are Black. And their captives also are Negro and Black. And of course, the Assyrian captivity was the captivity that sent the 10 tribes into North America, so Zephaniah says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. So that is the ocean, the Atlantic, the Ethiopic Sea, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering. All of these areas have ley lines in them. And all of these areas have superstructures. And so we'll define Shem's land according to this and the center of the earth. And there came forth on the writing as Shem's lot, the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself, and for his sons, and for the generations of eternity. From the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water, from the river of Tina, and his portion goes towards the west, through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abyss, out of which this river goes forth and pours its waters into the sea Mead. And this river flows into the great sea, and all that is towards the north is Japheth's, and all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Lord, and the Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed the God of gods, who had put the word of the Lord in his mouth, and the Lord forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever. So once again, what happened was Shem's land, what we call Africa today, is called Aphia. And because he was the firstborn son, he got two portions, a double portion. So he got half the earth, and Ham and Japheth got a quarter each. The portion of the eldest son is what? A double portion. That is Torah. It extends till it reaches the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. And it extends towards the east till it reaches the Garden of Eden, to the south thereof, to the south, and to the east of the whole land of Eden, and the whole of the east. It turns to the east, and it proceeds till it reaches east of the mountain named Rapha, and it descends to the bank of the mouth of the river Tina. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever, unto his generations forevermore. Africa was Ham's land in the west. Japheth, or Japheth, was in the north. And of course, Shem got the east and the south. That is his allotment. So if we look at this ancient compass, what it does is it shows very clearly this division. The land of Shem, the land of Israel, was the Orient. Why? Because it's at the navel center of the earth around which everything else is oriented. Okay? And it was called Aphia. Remember, in the King James, all S's are F's. Okay? So it would be called Aphia or Asaya. Yes, the Hamites, the East Indians, and the Asians have stolen the name Asia or Aphia, meaning the face of Yah. The face of Yah. When Marcus Garvey was asked whether he was African or Jamaican, he replied, "I will not give up a continent for an island." So what can reverse Pangea do to help us to mend the relationship between the indigenous Black Americans or Negro Americans and those coming from the land of Africa? Well, reverse Pangea and the Book of Jubilees helps us to completely solve the problem. We know, understand, and realize that South America was once connected to Africa. And so the two of them were one land and people, the Shemites. Now this includes the West Indians and, of course, Western Europe and Britain. And, people always mistake this for meridians, but this is just the connecting points. This is where the whole earth reconnects in reverse Pangea, because Pangea, so Pan means face, Ga means walk, Gimel, Ya means Yah. So, face of Yah walking or moving apart is Pangea. South America was once connected to Africa. And so the two of them were one land and people, the Shemites. Judgments really by Yah, or wars, destroyed the earth and drove the continents apart. So that's the premise that we begin with here. Reverse Pangea. You guys know that's my thing. Major judgment was the judgment of Babylon, the three towers and the Tower of Babylon. The next one was the deliverance of Israel from Egypt. And so this is Mauritania, the Riyadh structure. And of course, Mauritania comes from the word Mor, Morishite, Mordecai, More, Morishgath. Of course, Ur comes from Ur of the Chaldees, which extended all the way from Hibernia and Ireland all the way down to South America, including Africa, as I've said. And so Ur means flame or light of Yah. Flame or light of Yah. And so the Shemitic men were known as Ur. Lights. Lights of the Father. Ur Ab. Lights of the Father Yahuwah. And so they had long been seduced by Egypt and Nimrod. And of course, casting, we've already been over this, is like the light taking hold of the door of the waters of life. So that's who the Chaldeans were. They were Shemites. And so the word funk has the F for the face or panim or mouth of Yah, the N for seed, right? And the K for the light. And so this is why these Chaldeans sing about how they have the funk. The relationship between the Chaldeans and Nimrod of Ham really began around the time of the building of the Tower of Babel, which Nimrod went ahead and built in the land of Shem, and Shem joined up with them. So let's read about the Tower of Babel. According to the book of Jasher, chapter 9, this is what's said about it. And King Nimrod reigned securely, and all the earth was under his control. And all the earth was of one tongue and words in union. And all the princes of Nimrod and his great men took counsel together, Put, Mitzrayim, Cush, and Canaan with their families, and they said to each other, Come, let us build ourselves a city, and in it a strong tower, and its top reaching to heaven, and we will make ourselves famed, so that we may reign upon the whole world, in order that the evil of our enemies may cease from us, that we may reign mightily over them, and that we may not become scattered over the earth on account of their wars. Now notice that these are the sons of Ham. So Shem has been given rulership over the earth, and this is Canaan, Put, and Mizrahim, and Cush. Okay, and of course Canaan is the seed of the fallen angels. And they all went before the king, and they told the king these words, and the king agreed with him in this affair, and he did so. And all the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men, and they went to seek an extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower. And they sought in the whole earth, and they found none like the valley east of the land of Shinar, about 2 days' walk. And they journeyed there, and they dwelt there, and they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower that they imagined to complete. So now they're heading east. And when they were building, they built themselves a great city, a very high, strong tower, and on account of its height, the mortar and the bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent to it until those who went up had completed a full year. And after that, they reached to the builders and gave them the mortar and the bricks, and thus was it done daily. And behold, these ascended and others descended the whole day. And if a brick should fall from their hands and get broken, they would all weep over it. But if a man fell and died, none of them would look at him. And as to the tower which the sons of men built, The earth opened its mouth and swallowed up 1/3 part thereof, 1/3 part. And a fire also descended from heaven and burned another third, and another third is left to this day. And it is this part which is aloft. And its circumference is 3 days' walk. So the remaining part is 3 days' walk. So the ocean swallowed up one of the 3 towers, fire burned the other third, and 1/3 part remained. So that's what Yah did to destroy the Tower of Babel. So the Riyadh structure is 40 kilometers in diameter, okay, or 25 miles. When you do the calculation, so the Riyadh structure is 40 kilometers, okay? 40 kilometers, 25 miles, okay? Okay, so then what is the calculation for circumference? Circumference equals 78 miles. How long does it take a person to walk in a day? 8 hours or less. A trained walker can walk 26 miles. It'll take you 3 days to walk around it. The city of Mauritania, that city, that Eye of God city in Mauritania, that connects right up with North America. So basically, that is where Mauritania connects with North America. And you can see how there would be a separation there when the Tower of Babel fell, because Yah destroyed it. And it was destroyed by the sea, right? And that's by the sea. And then you could see that after that kind of thing, because there was Pangea and everything happened in the time of Peleg, when the earth was divided. And so you can see that because of that abominable practice, that might create a fissure or split.
The Great Lakes is new. At the bottom of the Great Lakes, they found all kinds of artifacts, which are definitely ancient. Look at all those pools of water. You see all those pools of water, all those lakes? Took a just pimp slap Canada. Like, it's like scratches everywhere. You feel what I'm saying? Like, look at that. And let us not forget about this. The Lewis Babel Ecological Reserve. All right. Literally called the Lewis Babel Ecological Reserve. Now, it's important for us to understand that this right here, believe it or not, don't want to sound too far-fetched or anything, but this right here is indeed the remains of the Tower of Babel. All right. No other place on earth has a lake that is shaped like an exact circle. Just want to make that make sense. When we read what happened to the Tower of Babel, how did y'all destroy the Tower of Babel in the book of Jasher? It says 1/3 of it sunk into the earth, the other third of it burned with fire, and then another third of it remained on land. And then the book of Jubilees says it got blew away with great winds. So that 1/3 that remained on land was blown away completely. When you look at the screen, it tells you that it's called the Lewis Babel Ecological Reserve because it's the Tower of Babel, guys. They're trying to put it in your face, but they say it's named after this Swedish explorer named Lewis Babel. Let me tell you something of why that's kind of malarkey. Babel is not a Swedish last name. You can Google it. Did you know that this circle is the exact size? The exact size of what Scripture says it is. The book of Jasher chapter 9 and 38 says that the Tower of Babel has a circumference of a 3 days walk, meaning you can walk around it, and by the time you get back to where you started, it would have been 3 days that passed. That's how big it was. And let me tell you something really, really cool. If I stood right here and I walked all the way around, guess what? That would be 3 days. That's how big this right here is. This is a 3 days walk too, and I'm going to prove it. It's basic math. It's only 3 hours off. This is exactly 3 days minus 3 hours.
So I'm going to say this. Both of the towers take about 3 days to walk around, both of the portions of the towers. And so I'm revising my theory to say that the REACT structure is the one that was burnt, and the one here in Quebec is the one that fell but didn't sink into the sea. Quebec area and Mauritania basically connect to a certain degree, and the third tower got swallowed up by the land and went into the sea. And so Babylon was an intersection of the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Mauritania very clearly lines up with this tower in Quebec, and this could be very well where the three towers are intersecting the land of Shem, the land of Ham, and the land of Japheth. And I mean, Canada is the land of Japheth, okay? And so apparently Ham's one went in the sea. And so it's very likely that perhaps the Gulf of Mexico is where the tower fell in for Nimrod. So let's look into where this relationship between Egypt and the Chaldeans began. And we're going to look at the book of Jasher. It's more of a historical book, only about 70% maybe biblically accurate, but it gives us some clues. So let's get into it.
And the fourth he called Calneh, because his princes and mighty men were consumed there, and they vexed the Lord, they rebelled and transgressed against them. And when Nimrod had built these cities in the land of Shinar, he placed in them the remainder of his people, his princes and his mighty men that were left in his kingdom. And Nimrod dwelt in Babel, and he there renewed his reign over the rest of his subjects, and he reigned securely. And the subjects and princes of Nimrod called his name Amraphel, saying that at the tower his princes and men fell through his means. And notwithstanding this, Nimrod did not return to the Lord, and he continued in wickedness and teaching wickedness to the sons of men. And Mardon his son was worse than his father, and continued to add to the abominations of his father. And he caused the sons of men to sin. Therefore it is said, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. At that time there was war between the families of the children of Ham, as they were dwelling in the cities which they had built. And Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, went away from the families of the children of Ham, and he fought with them, and he subdued them. And he went to the 5 cities of the plain, and he fought against them, and he subdued them, and they were under his control. And they served him 12 years, and they gave him a yearly tax. At that time died Nahor, son of Serug, in the 49th year of the life of Abram, son of Terah.
Now Abraham had been hidden away from Nimrod because of a prophecy that a child who would be born whose offspring would kill Nimrod. And so Abraham was sent away to be schooled by Shem and Noah and learn all of the books and the truth about Yah.
And in the 50th year of the life of Abram, son of Terah, Abram came forth from the house of Noah and went to his father's house. And Abram knew the Lord, and he went in his ways and instructions, and the Lord his God was with him. And Terah his father was in those days still captain of the host of King Nimrod, and he still followed strange gods. And Abram came to his father's house, and saw 12 gods standing there in their temples. And the anger of Abram was kindled when he saw these images in his father's house. And Abram said, As the Lord liveth, these images shall not remain in my father's house. So shall the Lord who created me do unto me, if in 3 days' time I do not break them all. And Abram went from them, and his anger burned within him. And Abram hastened and went from the chamber to his father's outer court. And he found his father sitting in the court, and all his servants with him. And Abram came and sat before him. And Abram asked his father, saying, Father, tell me, where is God, who created heaven and earth, and all the sons of men upon earth, and who created thee and me? And Terah answered his son Abram and said, Behold, those who created us are all with us in the house. And Abram said to his father, My lord, show them to me, I pray thee. And Terah brought Abram into the chamber of the inner court. And Abram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of gods of wood and stone, 12 great images, and others less than they, without number. And Terah said to his son, Behold, these are they which made all that thou seest upon earth, and which created me and thee and all mankind. And Terah bowed down to his gods, and he then went away from them. And Abram his son went away with him. And in the evening of that day in that house, Abram was clothed with the Spirit of God. And he called out and said, Woe unto my father and this wicked generation, whose hearts are all inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone, which can neither eat, smell, hear, nor speak, who have mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, hands without feeling, and legs which cannot move. Like them are those that made them, and trust in them. And when Abram saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father, and he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand, and came unto the chamber of the gods, and he broke all his father's gods. And when he done breaking the images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great God which was there before them, and he went out. And Terah his father came home, for he had heard at the door the sound of the striking of the hatchet. So Terah came into the house to know what this was about. And Terah, having heard the noise of the hatchet in the room of images, ran to the room to the images, and he met Abram going out. And Terah entered the room, and found all the idols fallen down and broken, and the hatchet in the hand of the largest, which was not broken. And the savory meat which Abram his son had made was still before them. And when Terah saw this, his anger was greatly kindled. And he hastened and went from the room to Abram. And he found Abram his son still sitting in the house. And he said to him, What is this work thou hast done to my gods? And Abram answered Terah his father, and he said, Not so, my lord, for I brought savory meat before them. And when I came nigh to them with the meat that they might eat, they all at once stretched forth their hands to eat, before the great one had put forth his hand to eat. And the large one saw their works that they did before him, and his anger was violently kindled against them. And he went and took the hatchet that was in the house, and came to them, and broke them all. And behold, the hatchet is yet in his hand, as thou seest. And Terah's anger was kindled against his son Abram when he spoke this. And Terah said to Abram his son in his anger, What is this tale that thou hast told? Thou speakest lies to me. Is there in these gods spirit, soul, or power to do all thou hast told me? Are they not wood and stone, and have I not myself made them? And canst thou speak such lies, saying that the large God that was with them smote them? Can they hear thy prayers when thou callest upon them? Can they deliver thee from the hands of thy enemies, or will they fight thy battles for thee against thy enemies, that thou shouldst serve wood and stone, which can neither speak nor hear? And surely it is not good for thee, nor for the sons of men that are connected with thee, to do these things. And Terah, seeing all that Abram had done, hastened to go from his house. And he went to the king, and he came before Nimrod and stood before him, and he bowed down to the king. And the king said, What dost thou want? And he said, I beseech thee, my lord, to hear me. Now 50 years back a child was born to me, and thus has he done to my gods, and thus has he spoken. And now therefore, my lord and king, send for him that he may come before thee, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil.
And so after a fiery trial, Abraham is freed, and Yah commands him to leave his father's house and the land of Nimrod and those Chaldeans which had betrayed Yahuwah, and to go to the land of Canaan, which is the land of Shem, to claim his inheritance. And he will soon become Israel. And of course, then Abraham begets Isaac and Esau slays Nimrod and takes on the spirit and kingdom of Babylon. And then Jacob goes captive to Laban, and then all the 12 sons go captive to Egypt. And of course, Egypt, they are freed from Egypt in much the same way, just as Abraham was freed from Nimrod. And so, of course, this first Exodus caused the destruction of true Egypt. And of course, that is located in the Grand Canyon, where the Shiva, Isis, and Cheops pyramid are the largest pyramids on the planet, 7,000 or more feet high. Okay, so we see here that the Pyramid of Giza is only 481 feet. Actually, it's been revealed there's a whole layer of Cholula that's buried underneath the mound that it appears to be on. But when we look at these pyramids in the Grand Canyon that were destroyed by Yah, we see that they are medium-sized. Isis temple is 7,000, over 7,000 feet high, compared to Giza, which is only 481. This is the true Egypt, because even if you cut their height in half, saying that the base was leading up to the top of the pyramid, it would still be about 3,500 feet.
Go ahead, take it to the cosmos. I got the cosmos. Going down 106, officially past that ball. Oh man, don't do it to me. Jamaica funk, that's what it is. Let it get into you. Fucking for Jamaica.
In the Amazon basin, in the lowland forests of Bolivia, archaeologists have discovered new evidence of an ancient civilization.
Nobody expected that kind of society in that region.
Using LiDAR technology, researchers peeled back the dense vegetation to reveal huge structures hidden beneath the trees.
Pyramids 20 meters high. The whole region has been so densely habitated during the pre-Hispanic time. That's incredible to believe.
Now, in an area once thought to be of little interest to archaeologists, hundreds of new sites have been uncovered.
There is new civilization, new culture waiting for us to study them. It's sort of a dream coming true.
So in 2019, a team set out by helicopter to try and uncover the true scale of this ancient civilization. With LiDAR revealed more than anyone had expected. Beneath the thick canopy were structures. Rectangular platforms, conical pyramids, defensive banks, canals, reservoirs, and long straight causeways connecting hundreds more settlements, large and small.
If we talk about Amazonia, we generally talking about people without agriculture. And to recognize as a first step that they were sedentary and that they are agriculturists, that is a big step.
Even just from the air, the newly found settlements give hints of a complex and unexpected way of living.
In near to every site, in 1 hour of walking, you will find at least one other site. Nobody expected that kind of society in that region. That's a new thing. Yeah, to find a densely populated area with settlements much larger than before.
So what does this tell us about the Kasarabe culture, the name given to the people who constructed these new settlements, and the 2 mounds that Heiko and colleagues already excavated?
Now, the word Kasarabe immediately will tell you that it has something to do with the Arabes or the Kasdim. The Kasdim. Like, a quesadilla or the light. Either one of those two or both.
When I'm giving conferences in Bolivia and people ask over there, and who were those people that constructed those mountains? I say, well, we just commence our studies over here. We don't know if...
The usual, we're not looking at the indigenous people. We have it couldn't be them, because it could only ever be us or Somalians. So Kasarabe culture seems to correspond to Llanos de Mojos and Beni Savannah. Beni, like Beni Israel, Beni Israel, House of Israel, or House of Shem. Savannah. So as usual, the Europeans deny the true indigenous people their culture, which was stolen and robbed from them. And these were Baal worshippers in Bolivia. And so these are the Chaldeans. These are the Shemites of South and Central America. And no, they were not just brought there in the Angolan slave trade. They're indigenous. They tell the story of the last man that was ever around who built those buildings, and no one knew what he looked like. And
Protection Agency found his body. It was on a straw-filled hammock that was dangling outside his hut. He apparently passed away peacefully because there were no traces of struggle or violence. His entire tribe had been slaughtered in a series of savage attacks that began in the 1970s and lasted for decades. The majority of the attackers were land-hungry cattle ranchers. No one outside of this man's community knew his name.
Cut to images of Asian, East Indian kind of looking people, and they say, well, he totally disappeared. But then cut to, we see these images of these brown people. So they're kind of lying to you and telling you the truth all at once.
Afro-Argentines, as the black people in Argentina are popularly known, formed a significant part of the Argentine population in the 18th century. In 1778, according to a census by its Spanish colonial masters, black people made up 37% of the total population of the South American country. By 1857, 79 years later, the black population had dropped to 15%. Today, a greater population of Argentina is white. Only 5% of Argentina is black, the lowest of all Latin American countries. As a matter of fact, their numbers have reduced drastically that it would be near impossible to see a black Argentine in sports, journalism, politics, and so on.
You didn't think about why all the Argentinian players are blonde and white? Like, you don't understand why all the Nazi Germans and fascist Italians all moved to Argentina after the First and the Second World War. You don't understand that Argentina literally killed all its black population because they want a homogeneous white nation. So sometimes I think about how, especially people who are in the major minority, basically white people, how they talk about countries and divorce that country of its genocidal history. It's interesting.
If they went from 70% down to about 15, and you'll find out they went down to 3%, who are those 30%? There's no way 30% of the people could control 70% of the population like that unless they genocided them.
Black community existed in Argentina but was erased around the early 20th century. Was the black account erased from Argentine history, or did Argentina erase its black people from history?
So they drop in this note about the Argentine tango dance having its origins in Angola to do another kind of a bait and switch, right? Because that's a very sort of what we would think of as a Western dance, not African.
Of Afro-Argentines dates back to the 16th century when black people, feet chained, were brought from their homelands in Africa to be traded as slaves in Argentina. Maria Remedios de Val, who fought in the Argentine Independence War along with her husband and sons. Originally, one of the popular answers as to how blacks were erased from Argentine history is the idea that these 18th century wars claimed the lives of many black men who represented the larger part of the black population. Admittedly, black lives were lost in the many wars that happened in Argentina. However, to claim these events solely account for the disappearance of blacks in Argentina is simply an exaggeration. Since the number of black men was on the decrease, black women were left with two choices: get married to Argentine men or contest for the few African men who were left. Some chose, if that would be considered a choice, the latter. What is strange are the conclusions that were drawn from this choice. Some have concluded that blacks wanted a place where they belonged. So, after the abolishment of slavery,
the slaves are said to have migrated from Argentina up northward towards Brazil.
Apparently, this conclusion was arrived at because some families were in fact purely black. However, this theory is unsatisfactory and insufficient on its own to explain how the black population completely fizzled out of the history of Argentina. Even if it's true, is migrating out of a country tantamount to migrating out of the country's history? In recent times, sequel to the re-emergence of the black community in the 20th century, Afro-Argentines continue to fight to bring back and keep the black account in Argentine history by telling their stories. A memorable feat was achieved when November 8 was assigned by the Argentine legislation to celebrate Maria Remedios de Val, the Afro-Argentine soldier who fought for Argentina during the Argentine War of Independence in the 1810s. Since 2013, November 8, officially referred to as the National Day of Afro-Argentines and African Culture, has served as a day when Argentina revisits and celebrates its African roots.
So before we take a look at the actual indigenous people greeting, I believe it's the Dutch when they come, I want you to take a look at all of these dresses these Ethiopian women are wearing. So these Ethiopian women would be a combination of Cushite, Shemitic, obviously Medo-Persian is Shemitic, right? And so these are the kinds of clothes they wear. They like to wear these white dresses. They love the red accent or a bit of color with these dresses. This image of the Argentinians looks like they're heralding and the coming of and inviting these other nations to their land. And there's an angel over them heralding the invitation of these foreigners to their land. And note their clothing. So the stats are that the Argentinians were, after, quote, slavery, were anywhere from 70 down to 30% of the population, and now they represent only 3% of it. And you look at the buildings that they built or lived in, because we know that they weren't built by the people who are there now, right? These are the buildings that were constructed by the old world there, and then the newer world probably 500 to 600 years ago. Check out my Hebrew World Wars videos, because again we see these buildings melted into mountains like there was some kind of incredible disaster or strange weaponry deployed to destroy these kingdoms. So we can clearly see that there's some kind of a history hidden here, especially since we never see it reported by either of these two guys, ever. No content, nothing. When I look at Argentina, there is no evidence of the indigenous black people being there, the Shemites. Okay? Now they're finding the structures, and they're still claiming that it's these straight-haired Indians. And then every single piece of history I look at is identical. So that's how you know it's a lie, because everyone's telling the exact same story. Oh yeah, the slaves came over here at this time. There's this female hero who fought in the war, and then the men were wiped out, and then they got the women to marry in with white men, and then they brought a bunch of Europeans over. What I think happened was they pushed the Shemites north. So in Argentina, they say that they whitened the population. They brought in more Europeans. They say that the war didn't really eliminate that many black people. But there are articles that old papers from universities that seem to talk about a real genocide. They also talk about a genocide of the indigenous people, but then they go, but that's the native people, the straight-haired Asian-looking people, which it's not. It's actually, so people don't mention it. Now, here's the most insidious thing. Several years ago, about 5 years ago, I saw a documentary on Joseph Mengele, and he moved to Argentina under a different name and continued to work in his concentration camps. And I remember in the documentary, and I cannot find any information on it. It's been totally scrubbed. But in the documentary, I saw that it was between 10 to 50 million black Argentinians that he ran through this concentration camp when he was there and killed them. That's what I remember. I can't find anything on it. So that would be after World War II. And that's when a lot of the Nazis went, and even Hitler was supposed to have sought solace there. And of course, it's close to the South Pole where all the, quote, alien experiments are and stuff like that, and where the whole world has a treaty not to go down to the South Pole. And so it seems like they wanted that area strictly white to protect those other people. It's also a place, South America is where there was supposed to be a lot of giants. And so the white giants that I talk about in my other videos, please take a look at those to find out more information. But nonetheless, so many of the Nazis went there. And strangely enough, you may not find this strange, or maybe you will. I don't. But there is an extremely high population in Argentina also. So both the Nazis are there and the Ish people are there. So there seems to be, people seem to be determined to cover up that history of whatever happened to the Shemitic people, really, of Argentina. Because to have 70% population go down to 30, then down to 3, that's not just the slave trade. And they tried it. The story is identical. No matter where you research this history, it's the same history I just gave you. That's kind of like when someone murders someone and everyone tells the exact same identical story with no differing details. You definitely know something's wrong. All right, so an International Association of Genocide Scholars discussed indigenous genocide in Argentina in this article. So basically what they did in Argentina was in favor of capitalism, they set aside the whole story of extermination, assimilation, or forced labor, or the participation in the military of the indigenous people. So they made capitalism the main story of their history, which of course is white supremacy. So here they're assuming that the audience believes that the indigenous people are straight-haired, sort of Asian-looking people. What do they call it? Obfuscation of the truth. So the blurring and smoke and mirroring of the truth, right? So on the one hand, the extermination of almost every native is reproduced, even in the discourse of those sectors that consider the conquest of the desert as genocide. There's a famous painting by Juan Manuel Blanes, a Uruguayan artist, that celebrates this heroic event. So what they're saying is that in this conquest of the desert painting, the army is only shown and the indigenous people are cropped out. The indigenous people are cropped out. But look at this odd picture of this white woman with these 2 black children who are rather well dressed, like all of the images of indigenous people from the southern America that we've seen. Those children look well dressed. And in other parts of this document, it talks about how they gave the children of the spoils of war to one another as gifts. This is the portion that is excluded from the bill in which this image is cast. Of course, the commercial version of the image from Almay has some Indians wrapped in blankets on the side, in the left corner. This conquest of the desert idea of it being a genocide is also part of the discourse of those who believe that nowadays there are no indigenous people in Argentina. Now, what is said is that the white people in Argentina tend to classify the indigenous people, quote, as foreigners. It's in particular in situations, precisely those who retain the best levels of physical and cultural vitality and reproduction rates as essentially foreigners. So you see here, they're calling the straight-haired, Asian-looking people. People are categorizing them as foreigners, okay? Example is the Mapuche people, right? So that sounds more like kind of Mexican-y, Asian, Indian, right? But not kind of Afro-Shemitic, right? Who have historically dwelled on both sides of the Andes and today divided between Chile and Argentina. So that would be from Ham's side of the border, all right? So the perception of the Mapuche people as foreigners was a product of political discourse. So they actually are foreigners because they're Hamitic, because the Shemitic people have afros and dark skin, all right? The same assertion of foreignness is used today to deny land rights to indigenous people in Patagonia, since the true Indians of Patagonia are known to be extinct. Indigenous claimants are assumed to be either liars or foreigners, which means they have no rights to the land. This may actually be true because the indigenous people should be black. So this is a mechanism of invisibilization, right? Together with the discourse of national homogeneity, see, which is what they're trying to do in Jamaica, say, oh, out of many people, one nation, had different effects on survivors of the genocide. Therefore, we cannot conceive of the Argentine state without the indigenous genocide and vice versa. So in this sense, it's important to stress two forms of violence in the 20th century: massacres and land explorations. During the presidency of Alvear, an indigenous protest was suppressed by the police of Chaco National Territory, resulting in the murder of 500 Toba Macawai people. The killings took place in the lands of Napalpi, a reserve for indigenous families that was considered a model. It had been founded by the federal state 13 years before with the aim of incorporating the natives into the capitalist production system as workers. So they had reservations there. All right. And this is what I heard, that they had these reservations or camps that were genocidal camps. And I saw some documentary where they were all black people, and I can't find it. Overcrowded, unhealthy, and exploitative conditions working from sunrise to sunset, as a survivor's daughter expresses it, as well as the prohibition imposed by the provincial governor Fernando Centeno forbidding indigenous people to travel to the neighboring provinces of Salta and Jujuy in search of better jobs by natives, and constant police persecution. We mainly just see police shooting brothers, right? Not other nations in America. Police persecution generated a protest movement among the communities of the reserve. In response, the local and national press referred to the possibility of Malones, raids, and to the existence of indigenous murderers and fanatical religious leaders. At the same time, landowners and local businessmen put pressure on Governor Centeno to bring the conflict to an end. They got them on reservations and they're controlling their movements, just like in the South African apartheid system. And they've destroyed all their monuments and buildings and are wondering who created the ones that they did find recently. Sounds like South Africa. So I guess a bunch of policemen were put in an airplane and they fired from land and air on the indigenous people who gathered at Napapui, and survivors were hunted down. This is the genocidal conduct. And then 1947, so this is around the time of World War II. Okay, this is what I'm talking about, right? And remember Mengele, Joseph Mengele, who did the concentration camps. Like I said, I thought I saw a documentary with him setting them up here in Argentina, him fleeing and then living in Argentina under a different name. So it says in 1947, there were massive layoffs in sugar refineries of the Argentinian Northwest, resulting in a famine among the communities of the Chaco region. Isn't that what they always have the African diaspora doing, the Shemites doing? So these were sugarcane harvesters, right? Then they had some meeting with one of their priests, and the people prayed and foraged for food. And then the federal government sent out gendarmerie who shot and bombarded the demonstrators, chasing the survivors through the jungle for more than a month and causing the death of a significant proportion of the Pilaga people. Estimates of the numbers range from 800 to 2,000 dead. So that means it's probably way higher than that. And then after this brutal repression, many were trying to escape to Paraguay, and they were transferred to a state colony in Formosa called Francisco Muñez. There they were forced to cut wood for a state-owned sawmill and sow rice, receiving no rewards from the harvest. Their living conditions were miserable, and in addition, children were separated from their families and sent to a religious institution. The worst problem with the colony was famine, so everyone was being starved to death and their children were taken. And so in the area of Rio Negro, many indigenous families were evicted from their land. Now, why is it called Rio Negro? Because they're Asian looking with straight hair? So expropriation by private businesses took 3.5 million hectares of land in 1994 and 650,000 in 2007. All right, so with all of that past us, I mean, some of it anyway, let's take a tour of how the Shemites and diaspora of Yasharel are just thriving all over South and Central America. This is Noir, Noir, noirguides.com. Oh, how secure this site is, because it's probably hacked because the content. But look at this. So these are the Afro-Belizeans. So British and French colonists vied to control the island, eventually deporting the Garifuna, sent them to Central America, where survivors formed communities along the Caribbean coast in Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Belize. See the Afro-Brazilian girls. Garifuna, so Belizean couple braiding hair, traditional dance, Pencetano, Belizean artist, Pencetano gallery, Garifuna children on the shore. Just amazing, right? Just amazing. What a rich Belizean culture. Just amazing. Like, this is like a feast of lost children. I mean, it's like, I have so many friends who would travel to these places. My dad would travel here all the time. He loved South and Central America. And a lot of his friends did. They were like activists. Belizean black and white cultural entertainment center. They're always, people are always forced to do these inclusion things. Like, we're going to include white people in our minority group. It's like it's always forced. Black Caribs, right? So it doesn't always mean the islands. I didn't know that. Can you believe it? I didn't know that. I mean, I'm learning a lot myself. You guys are learning with me, snorkeling. So, you know, they emphasize the tourism for money, but beautiful, right? What's he doing here? Manufacturing drums. So these are all the drums he's manufactured. And the children, beautiful. See, they're literally marketing the people. This is tourism, but so African, right? Shemitic. Black Caribs of Belize. Maybe a controlled narrative, but nonetheless, I mean, Belize, look. So maybe that they're, you know, so Afro-Peruvians now. So here's Afro-Peruvians. This is like a feast of culture, right? Look at Sophia Charlotte, first Black Queen of England. So they're just citing her there as a... She wasn't the first Black Queen of England and Ireland. Queen Elizabeth was. And we don't know who even came before her. But look at these people. Of course, here's the Jesuits, right? Probably. I don't know. Could be Yasharel, though. I don't know. So Afro-Colombians. So sister girl getting the hair braided as usual. So these people look just like you. Look at these kids posing. Looking all odd. Imitating their African-American brothers and sisters, right? Or their Shemitic. I'm just going to have to say Shemitic. People have to start using the word Shemitic. So this Afro-Colombian writer. So again, this is noirguides.com. Afro-Colombian dance in San Basilio. Afro-Colombian children looking just like the ones in America and Africa. Dancers. Dance troupe Bogota. So that's House Gimel, Bayat Gimel T. House going to the tree of life, or the N sign. Afro-Colombian music and dance troupe. I mean, isn't this just, fam, isn't this just like, this is all for their tourism, but this is really, yeah, set this up for you to tour your culture, your people. These aren't just all slaves. There's too many. And it's not just that Yasharelites multiplies, that they were there. This is Shem's land. The Indian. Maybe when I say East Indian, I'm using the wrong word. You know what I mean? East India. Yandia. If you change the I from, this guy looks Jewish. So he looks like an Edomite, Jewish. Afro-Colombian doctor anthropologist Manuel Zapata Aviela. So he looks like an Edomite. Afro-Colombian children during the feasts. Look at them. So look, that girl I showed you how straight her hair is, right? Her hair is growing right out of her head like that. And look at these children. Same thing there. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe these are wigs. I don't know. But that girl. Feast of San Pancho. What is the Feast of San Pancho? So, poet and singer Maria Elcina Valenza Cordova. So, Feast of San Pancho. Okay, San Pancho Music Festival, February 24th, 25th, and 26th. I don't know if that's it. So San Pancho Days, Authentic Festival of Culture. Looks like Pesach, September 25th to October 4th. That's Pesach. That's the Pesach time frame. Showing you some white people. All right, let's try that out more. So it's Saint Pancho. Or maybe they're celebrating a saint. Well, maybe it got, look, he's a dog, right? So maybe it's San Pancho Music Festival. Now this one's in February. Again, that's the one we keep getting diverted to. All I can tell you is that for now, because here's Stolen Islands, Black Indigenous History of Land Exploitation. So you see they're all black. Indigenous cosmologies, the land, all beings, ecological web of homeland, give people our existence, languages, knowledge, ways of life, and understanding of our place in universe. With that as a foundation, individual people live in cone. Scholar Sani, so that could be Shem, Shemi, Adamu, Yaru, Ibrahim, Yahaya. Hebrew or Shemitic. So this is from yesmagazine.org. Yahaya explained in an academic paper reviewing indigenous African perspectives on land, recognition of kinship with land is accompanied by. So African land is based on communal rights belonging to the living, the dead, and the as yet unborn, so they are inalienable. That's right, but also individuals do get land allotments in Torah. But generally, yeah, it belongs to the nation. Indigenous affairs, they're raising, remember they said raise it to the ground of the temple, the second temple, when it fell. And it says 1921, raising of Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as Black Wall Street. Same terminology, right? So this is, again, these are indigenous folks in Oklahoma and stuff spreading out over the land. That's what I believe, because, you know, a lot of the African Americans believe that it's indigenous, they're indigenous African American, may be offended, but I truly believe America is Ham's land, that it is Babylon, because the biggest pyramids in the world are there. And Shem is not he's a pyramid builder, is a slave, or when he's sold out to. And it does say that Judah and the 12 tribes would be enslaved to Babylon, the hammer of the whole earth, which is America. So this was a name I was looking for, Mewukema, Ohlone tribe. So this was one of the names I was given. And this is supposed to be one of the black tribes, like one of the Negro tribes. Mewikome Alome. So here it is. Here they are with their afros, their kinky hair, dark skin, muscled bodies. But then so here again, more pictures. And you can read more. But then they start to throw in the Latins here. They throw in the Latins down there. But this was the original people, right? So now they throw in the Latin, the straight-haired ones, right? This is San Francisco Bay Area. So again, I kind of go back and forth over this debate as to whether or not the indigenous people, again, might have been black. And they might have been Japheth. So I still go back and forth over that. So this is about the California genocide, but they're always representing it as these people. However, look at the little black child, but it looks like this is very photoshopped. That child's face is photoshopped. So I don't know. But notice here, is this it? So this is the genocide of California Indians. Again, it's the same ones. All right, the Mewikema. But when you look at some of these sites that you can link through to, you will find, see, these women are called India too, and they call themselves Asians. So there's definitely a mix, a Sayan or a Payan. I don't know if it's a P, a SH. So these are the people calling themselves Paleo-Americans. See, black, Paleo-Americans. See, they're calling them black. So this is kind of the Caribbean, British Honduras area where people fled to. Garifunia's true black Indian tribe. See, there weren't any Arawaks in Jamaica. That's a lie. So here they are again. Sorry about that. The Garifuna youth. So he's some youth leader who was abducted. Abducted by the police. He's dealing with the same issues. Afro-Hondurans. Look at this beautiful little girl. See this, I mean, I just invite you, Hebrew Israelites, to just go and take a look at all of this, because it's such a rich ourguides.com, so do go to it. You see the East Indian influence right in her face. This is called Black Noir Guides, again, black eyes. So here you see the mixture again with the East Indians, right? There's some more images, coins and such. So you see the Afro global presence through photography, video, and visual storytelling. So this is page 2 on noirguides.com. So you can see why they say this is not secure as a site, because look at all these resources. Now, this is Photographers Without Borders, and they have a lot of photographs of indigenous black people, but of course they are always throwing in these people who are educating and colonizing, and again, I think they're Horites. So when you look up indigenous people of Coqui, Colombia, you get the plague of frogs. Now here's the Colombian bands keeping African roots, they're saying, and of course it's all one continent, so they're calling them Afro-Colombian. So I believe that this movement for indigenous people has some real roots, because when you look at Madame Blavatsky, they talk about making new races, right? So I'm wondering, so this is Cali. So Cali again is East Indian word, or California, right? But again, California is Babylon. That's why they have the Egyptian pyramids there. But just all the color and the beauty, and then of course here's, see what this is. Look at that. Look at her, beautiful, right? I think this is actually, I think this woman has a site, and she, like, on TikTok, and she's always modeling clothes. She's just beautiful. I think that's her. I can't remember what her name is, but and I love this, like the bowls they have, and so they roll up this cloth, but look at her, so beautiful, right? And then here's the other people from the other side of the mountains, the other side of the Andes and stuff. But again, so this is Cimarron, so moron, Cimarron, or Cameroon, right? So again, it's a callback to Africa, Afro-Colombians. So they call them Afro-Colombians. Really, it should be Shemitic people, because there is a divide between Africa and the Americas, even though there shouldn't be. So rather than argue about the name, because I don't think Africa is right, I think it's Asaya or Afaya or Ashaya. So that's, could be Ashay, right? Ashaya has Yah's name in it because his land is named after him, or Aphaya because it's his face, right? I had one of my teachers who's been teaching for over 35 years talk about the name Isaiah and Isaiah, Asia being the original name, and I haven't been able to talk to him about it. That was like 3 years ago, and it just stuck in my head. I could not get it out. Columbia ethnic groups. And so I really have to talk to him about it to get that, because he speaks Hebrew. Even though it's the Ish Hebrew, he has so much research, detailed and scriptural research he's done. All right, so this is some witchcrafty kind of stuff there. So, and look at it. It's like blackface. These white people having stolen, right? Having stolen the identity. It's the same thing they do in Britain, because they're celebrating, right? They're celebrating the fact that, look at, that's a dead person. That they stole the land. They overcame Yasharel or the Shemites and stole the land. And this is what they do at Carnival, because Carnival is mocking, and it's changing the roles. It's a changing of the roles. And so the masters become the servants and the servants become the masters. And it's an extension of the masquerade, because it is just a masquerade, because the people ruling are not the real rulers, right? And I think it's tied to the Day of the Dead, because it's the dead things that come up from the sea that are ruling in these countries, right? The children of the fallen angels are ruling in these nations. Wow, isn't that beautiful? Oh my gosh, I really need to go there. Yeah, so the children of the fallen are ruling in these nations, and they're celebrating the Day of the Dead, the victory of the dead. But they're going to celebrate the Day of the Dry Bones Rising. That's probably was the original Day of the Dead. People were covertly celebrating, which became, you see where the two meet? You see what I mean? It is like this dialect. It's like an hourglass or an infinity sign. Like one kind of turns back into the other, and redemption is brought through, right? Here we go again. What it means to be black in Colombia. Wear blackface. This festival called Carnaval Blancos y Negros, right? My Negro to Blanco series is supposed to celebrate Colombia's diversity at the top of each year, despite the event's popularity. Some activities associated with Carnaval Blancos y Negros serve as a painful reminder of complicated racial history. So this is exactly what they do in Germany. It's what they do in America. I'm sure they probably do it in Africa, probably South Africa, right? And it's a mockery. So this guy looks kind of Asian or Eastern, like Mexican or something, right? And look how them have the white on them face. So it's, I think maybe they understand the dynamic, or they're not as pressurized by it. I don't know the racial complexity of it. Maybe they don't feel it as much, but I severely doubt it. It is what it is, right? But it's switching back right now. So it's Cartagena. So these are, I'm having fun with the accents. So Afro-Caribbean fashion. So, and then when you see this long hair, right? That's the mix with the Indians. And what I want to show you is the original. I may have to do a 3-part series on this and just keep giving you guys, just samples of the culture, because man, this is a feast. Man, this is a feast. So then here's the other people, right? The other people claiming to be the people. But really their land is on the other side of the mountains, according to go back and watch my Shem, Ham, and Japheth video on Jubilees. And their land, I think, is on the other side of the Andes because Ham lost so much of his territory due to sin. Yah judged him and lost all this territory. Indigenous people of Koki, see what it comes up with? These people look completely Asian. Right? Look at what it's showing. Anytime you have a particular people being marketed, you understand there's an agenda. I had to dig for this. I've been working on this for almost 10 days, this series. I'm already at about 2.5 hours. And this is the first stuff to come up, but it took me about 5 or 6 days to get the other stuff. I mean, I probably could have searched better, but I listened to a particular woman's broadcast where she was talking about this. And here's some of the names. I can't really spell them, so please somebody put the correct spelling in. But here's some of the names I'm trying to get. This is just a link to the CIA handbook I was just talking about in the documentary. But yeah, so the way that we talked about those people. So these are the names, and they have Yah in them very frequently.
So alegría is her favorite. That's what I got.
Alérense, alegría. Con coco y anica, cero compre mi avi, que vengo del barrio Semania. Mira que lo que tiene ahí alegrísima.
She's a palenquera from a tiny village in northern Colombia called San Basilio del Palenque. It's the first free town in all of the Americas, founded by slaves who escaped from the Spanish way back in 1691. Andrea makes these sweets.
Ponle un poquito más de candela, o un poquito de candela en yaira, que juega juego rápido. Este es de yuca con coco, leche, canela, clavito, vainilla, moscada, anís.
Women like Andrea commute from this village to Cartagena every day to sell sweets and fruits to tourists and locals on the streets. And the vibe in Cartagena in general is heavily influenced by West African and Caribbean overtones. Scenes like this are everywhere, palenqueras included. For the people of Palenque, retaining their culture is top priority.
Palenque es un pueblo único, es el rincón de África en Colombia.
This is John. He's very passionate about preserving this culture.
Los palenqueros y los colombianos y el resto del mundo tienen una gran responsabilidad en aras de preservar, proteger, salvaguardar, fortalecer y difundir esas manifestaciones culturales que dieron como resultado el reconocimiento por la UNESCO como patrimonio oral inmaterial de la ONU. Su lengua es de origen africano, especialmente la familia lingüística Bantu, Kikongo y Kimbundu.
And it's spoken only here in the town of Palenque.
La gente de acá, en la ciudad esto no se ve, no se puede vivir esa tranquilidad que se vive acá.
El Pacífico. Bienvenidos al Pacífico. Bueno, ya estamos aquí en Coquí. Soy coquiseño 100%. Coquí es un corregimiento que fue fundado por mi familia. Hace muchos años, es decir, mi familia fueron esclavos, trabajaron en minería hacia el interior del departamento del Chocó. De allá, cuando ya tuvieron la libertad, pues hace mucho, no tengo el año preciso, pero hace más o menos unos 150 años que fundaron esta comunidad. Toda esta tierra de mi familia, toda esta playa, Y lo que ellos han hecho a la medida del tiempo es a las personas que vienen a la comunidad, que vienen a poblar el pueblo, les dan tierra o les prestan. Y ese préstamo de tierra es para que tú trabajes toda la vida. Casi nunca lo devuelven. Decía, como es que coja y trabaje para toda la vida.
Caballeros y niños a la limpieza. Con todo, con sol, con todo el sol. ¿A quién? No, si no vas a la limpieza no va a mi cumpleaños.
Pueblo, la gente va bajando poco a poco y van cayendo y vamos limpiando todo este pueblo. La idea es que por lo menos los plásticos de las calles y los montes los quitemos. Entonces siempre salimos con alegría, con entusiasmo, niños, los viejos, jóvenes.
Me gusta trabajar en esta parte del Chocó.
It's really hard to watch these documentaries with these other nations in here presuming to educate these people about how to grow and plant on their own land in an environmentally friendly way when they are already doing that and that's already their culture. And so here she is as an environmentalist co-opting the whole process and trying to control and engineer it. It's really so absolutely ridiculous.
El ciclo reproductivo de esta especie para que ellos tengan unos cultivos que sean sostenibles sin venir a intervenir el bosque, donde ellos de la tierra puedan tener un ingreso económico y puedan sostener a sus familias con esta economía que la tierra nos brinda.
Acá casi todo lo que uno se come diario, lo captura diario.
Si saca uno mucho pescado, una parte es para él.
And as well, she sort of situates her own tourism within the community, part of the community. But I just am not buying it, sorry.
Si no captura uno peces. Me encanta la pesca porque fuera de uno alimentarse de los peces, también es un deporte, ¿sí? Se olvida uno de cualquier vicio, de cosas malas, cuando uno está pescando, ¿sí?
Notice how this woman frames herself as delivering the food, providing, being the provider.
Tengo una familia, mujer, 3 hijas, Katie, Carol y Kami, ¿sí? 3 niñas muy hermosas. A Carol le gusta mucho pescar. A Carol le gusta mucho pescar.
Yo siempre he dicho que nos tienen aquí cuidando un oxígeno para el mundo. En este Chocó biodiverso, para que sigamos cuidando esta tierra que no es solamente de nosotros, sino del mundo entero.
So anyway, I wanted to share this really quickly because there's some things that I wanted to point out. First of all, I wanted to point out that Native Americans here first, again, as I've always said, the first ones here were dark colored, copper colored like her. And then also I want to point out the correlation, the simulation between African Americans and Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, and how we tie back to Africa. And you heard her say that I'm not saying that we're not from the same family back in time. She just wants to point out that her lineage of people were in the Americas long before the transatlantic slave trade began to happen. I don't perceive Native Americans
as being non-Africans. And I'm using African loosely only because of the fact that I know that Africa was named after the explorer Leo Africanus. And so African was not necessarily a term that we gave ourselves. We called ourselves by nationality, whether it be Israelite, whether it be Ethiopian, whether it be Egyptian, whatever. So I'm using the term African loosely. I believe that Native Americans, indigenous Native Americans, the copper-colored ones, and African Americans, and Israelites alike, all go back to African, so-called, African lineage and ancestry, because whether or not the Native Americans were in America before we came over on the ships, we all still go back to Adam and Eve, and those two people originated on the continent of Africa at Kebulan, whatever you want to use. And so I also want to point out some of her tribal wear. And if you notice that she said that she comes from a long line of royal tribal Native American chiefs. And I wanted to point out the correlation between, if you look at what she has here, I'm going to show you another picture, but if you look at what she has here around her neck, it's very similar to, let me just show it now. This is a full picture of her. It's the same woman you were just listening to, Shatta Indian, and you can see here she has the beaded neck dress with the beaded fringes. Now, here's another picture of it. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can to get this in 10 minutes. Beautiful hair, just like my mother's before my mom cut hers. Anyway, beautiful hair. And you can still see the same neck dress and that's horsetail. I thought it was fringes, but it looks like horsehair. But anyway, if you look at her beaded dress, you can see the same thing here with the Igbos. Now, this is a royal, this is a men's groom garment, and I've seen it also applied to royalty with Igbos, but it's the exact same thing, the exact same style. Here's another one. This one actually says chieftaincy. So this is what Igbo chiefs would wear. Same exact thing that she has on. The fringes are a little different. The beadwork is a little bit more different colors, but it's the exact same concept. You can see the same similar shape. Now, some of them have them open and some of them have them connected. Another thing I want to show is the Hosa. They have the exact same thing. Now, in this picture, it's kind of hard to see it right here, but I'm going to show you some other pictures where you can see that better. But you can see the same exact thing here, and the fringe is coming down here. I think she has one similar around her neck. There might be a necklace. You can see the same beaded around his neck with the fringes. Same thing, okay? Let me see if I can find another picture. And this one here, this is a Hosa traditional wedding, a groom. Same exact concept. Beaded around the neck, beaded, and then it has the fringes, just like the Native American woman, just like the Igbo tribe people that I was going to show you. Same thing here. It was a similar thing here that Nelson Mandela has on. He was of the Hosa tribe as well. And then
the hardest part I've seen in my fight, and I'm the chief of the tribe, is when you come up against people of color as well as European descent, and you say Indians, they're looking for the Bill Cody long range of Tonto style thing. And when you actually show them that the indigenous people were actually my color, as I have a habit of telling people, a cocoa brown, or a brown piece of leather well put together. I have a lot of ways of using slangs to tell people that we are still here because we were not weak. We were here before DeSoto and Christopher Columbus. You have to be strong to make it through those disasters. During Katrina, I told them Katrina was not a Category 5. My people had came through some Category 5s, and we survived them. So Katrina, to me, was going to be an easy thing to survive. Because when you're been hit by a category named DeSoto, Category 5, and it lingers around for 400 to 500 years, steady beating on the shore, and it just won't move, that's a disaster.
When Yahuwah thy Elohim shall have brought thee into the land, which he sware to thy fathers, to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give thee, great and beautiful cities, which thou did not build, houses full of all good things, which thou did not fill, wells dug in ore, pits or pools, the rock which thou didst not dig, vineyards and olives which thou did not plant, then having eaten and being filled, beware lest thou forget Yahuwah thy Eloha, that brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I find very much so in places like Britain, for example, in the UK, Spain, and so on. We have all of these buildings that were constructed. Some of them are left over from the giants because that's what the scripture says will happen, that Israel will return to their lands and they will get the buildings of the giant. The other thing is that the Hebrews, the 10 tribes in particular, did a lot of building, construction, and formwork. Why you see in Columbus's and Cortez's New World discoveries, you see these images of these people living in the midst of these beautiful buildings, and they're not necessarily out of scale for them, like some of the ones that were taken over from the giants. Also, the 10 tribes were brick makers, and I want you to watch this video about the 10 tribes who still remain in America who are brick makers and their relationship to ancient structures.
Okay, a lot of the truth was in the St. Louis Cathedral. Where did they put the records? A lot of the truth was in the Cabildo. Where is it? A lot of the truth is inside the tombs of the graves that's at St. Louis Cathedral, because they have a lot of Indians buried in there too. The bricks that built St. Louis Cathedral, my people made those bricks. The bricks that built the tomb in the older graves came from my people. Those St. Louis Cathedral, my people made those bricks. The bricks that built the tomb in the older graves came from my people.
Remember, the tribes of Israel always buried their family members in tombs, not in the earth, and they didn't burn them.
The architect Hemiunu and Khufu go up symbolically to unveil the Pyramidion. The Pyramidion is revealed. The crowd shouts with joy. 20 years of hard work for their king is coming to an end.
King Solomon was known as the master builder. To the Masons, he's known as the master builder, the master mason. So people in approximately 800 BC, the 10 tribes of northern Israel were conquered by the Assyrians. And the Assyrians took them eastward into Asia. And according to the book 2nd Esdras, which is in what is called the Apocrypha, but the Apocrypha was only removed from Scripture 200 years ago, while the 10 tribes were in captivity to the Assyrians, they took counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never any mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow paces of the river. For the Most High showed signs for them and held still the flood, till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. And that country was called Eretz Azarath, Terra Azarath. The definition in our original pictographic language, Terra or Eretz Azarath means another land, the final place of the end, vanishing point, time out of mind. Another next strange land. Posterity, hindermost, reward. So when you watch my Northern Kingdom video, you will see that they were taken both from West Africa to North America, and they were also taken in the other direction and into Asia and across the Bering Crossing. So they were scattered to the four corners by the Assyrians. So this is the Chaldeans, and possibly Esau was involved with them at that time as well. We already talked about Sri Lanka and India being part of Shem's land, and that possibly being where Babylon was and where the Assyrian kingdom might have been east of that. Or by east, I mean west, a little closer towards Africa. And so you can check out my Shem, Ham, and Japheth videos, and especially my Ham videos will touch on that. So what we're dealing with right now, though, is the indigenous to the west side, South America, Chaldeans or Assyrians. So not the ones that are over on the other side of Africa or where they call the Middle East, or all the way over to India and Sri Lanka, but we're talking about the ones over here in the west and the southwest down in South America.
Then I have to go to mine, like I told this caller that come from you. How far back you think they've been stealing our color and race?
Thank you.
And do you think they're going to give the real people back their race? No. That's something we have to stand up. We have been allowing, like I was telling you before the show started, we have allowed people to make us accept things. When the Europeans have come here, whatever they don't like, they write a law. And they stick together and they push it through.
And the Dawes' final roles were established as a basis for citizenship in the Cherokee Nation. Every Cherokee Nation citizen today can trace their roots to an ancestor on the Dawes rolls.
First thing I want to say that we all are one people. Now we might be subdivided into different names under Australians, Libyans, Puerto Ricans, Haitians, whatever. We all still one people. That's right. If we say that we are Shatta and we are Native Americans and we've been here on this land, that's who we are. Now I can give you a brief history on how the West Africans came over on the boat to South America and set up civilization. And it's been documented that the stone heads are still down in La Venta, down in South America. Those, they call them Olmecs. The Olmecs mixed with some of the Chinese invaders that were coming in through the Bering Strait. And we mixed together and we made what is called the so-called Native American now, which is the red man.
That's right.
That's going around perpetrating on our property. Now, what you had done is we gave them parts of the land to inhabit, and we mixed in with those people. But you had the Europeans that came in and took it away from all of us through trickery, through
disease.
So what you're doing is you're actually giving us a history of integration and how integration has always been detrimental to the black man, be he called indigenous to this continent or any continent.
Whether they've been there 2,700 or 1,700 years, at this point, I believe the 10 tribes considered themselves indigenous, although she knows they came from Africa. And there are other people who say they came up from the south, which conforms more to the idea of Shem's land being in the south, right? But they got pushed up by the colonizers to then build America. No, Obama does not love black people. He doesn't even consider himself black. But when he came out, he immediately made sure that he gave grants and awareness, even to Chief Warhorse, to further this cause. So to me, that's a little curious.
Let's look at the census that's coming out. First, my people were under Indian. Then someone come along and say, well, we're going to take them, we're going to move them again. We're going to make them mulatto. So some of my people got trapped back there under Indian while some moved into the mulatto era. Then when the white man seen that wasn't going to eliminate enough of us, then he moved us from mulatto. Then he moved us to colored. I can show you how I got where I'm at. So then my people, some of them got left into the colored zone. Then they moved my people again into Negro, black, and African American. All I'm asking, my blood kin, I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm looking for a Pacific people that's lost here in New Orleans that have the same blood lineage that the two of us have.
And so the 10 tribes had a tendency, especially coming from doing this Mason type work, to build structures for other nations and even for themselves. And so this was even around beginning from the time when Joseph went into the kingdom of Egypt, because he set that precedent by being part of that kingdom. And then the 10 tribes, the 11 tribes being enslaved because Levi didn't build the temples.
And after a while, they filtrated us into what we know as African American today. I'm not saying we're not family from back in time. I'm saying I was just here. Some come by slave ship. I came here years before by entrepreneurship. Either way it go, brother, we in here on the same ship. And this is what I'm challenging my brothers and sisters to do. Let's see what ship we in now. And what can we do to stop up and plug up some of these holes before we sink even deeper?
The complexion of the Carolina Indians is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick and not very long, tied back behind the head like a small tail. For the physique of these men, they are well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we, and they have broad chests, strong arms and legs, and other parts of the bodies are well composed. They're broad in face and have big black eyes. They have a sharp cunning and are agile and swift runners. The Maccabean period and the period of Alexander the Great, the southern kingdom was taken captive, and this was the time when the scriptures were translated into the Septuagint. And so now here was the southern kingdom and actually the northern kingdom captive to the Greeks. And some people like to say, well, the Greeks, Japheth was brown, but there are other accounts. If you watch my video series on the Canaanites, American gods, and white Egyptians, you will see that there were both black and white people in those regions, in the region of Greece, but also you're going to find that Japheth gets force mixed with Ham. And so this brings out the fallen angel seed among the Greeks, because the Greeks were Japheth and Ham, basically. And so you see the features of the Greeks, or the white Gentiles, the Canaanitish people with the fallen angel seed, as well as the blacks. And it seems that there are it can be possible that there are other descendants of Japheth who are brown too. So like I always say in my videos, the black descendants of Japheth and Medo-Persia are in Ethiopia. So I believe everybody's race has got black players and white players. Everybody, all the sons of Noah. And then of course there's the Canaanites.
The image of black in Western art. I've gone into this book in the past. And that basically even the cover shows you how Greece was translated from dark-fleshed Japhetic people to pale people.
Now, just as the African diaspora are used as soldiers in the present, very likely they were also used as soldiers in the past. And we know that the 10 tribes were among the Greeks, because Greeks is in North America here. And we also know that so was Israel, so was the Yehudi, the southern tribe. And we also know that whenever any nation prospers, then what happens is that that becomes the focus of the world, and you get these multicultural nations. That's basically, it's always Babylon. Greece was Babylon, Egypt was Babylon, Babylon was Babylon, both of them. So they're always going to have a mixed multitude, because that is the culture of Babylon, confusion by mixing.
This is Psalms 85:11, and it reads, "Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven." So the truth that's springing out of the earth are the artifacts that are being dug up and that have been dug up and represented, even though they haven't been represented in Hollywood and in movies. These images, it says, the scenes of Hercules, fighting against the Egyptians, Hercules slaying Berseus the priest, side B, the soldiers coming to aid Berseus. So this big, huge black dude was destroying all these priests. And these soldiers, who were your Greeks, were coming to fight against Hercules. All right? So these were the ruling class people in that land.
3 Ethiopias. Keep in mind there were 3 Ethiopias, one in so-called India, one what we know as Ethiopia now today, and then the one in South America. And this is when, remember, the Chaldeans were all up in the Greek culture, and the 10 tribes were captive here. This is after This is 400 BC. The 10 tribes went captive by the Assyrians and were also taken over to North America. Not only were they taken east of Africa, but they were taken west into North America, into what is called Greece. Greece and Rome are also here in North America. And the Chaldeans were up in the place as their Ethiopian selves. The Hamites were up in the place as their Ethiopian selves. And I'm sure there were even Ethiopians that were coming out of the line of Keturah and Abraham who were there too. So, but I do believe all the sons of Noah, the indigenous people, were all black. And so this may be a combination of various people. And then the fallen angel seed, which got mixed in with the Edomite seed, were the paler people and the Canaanite seed. So you do see a mix of people.
In 2 Maccabees, 11th chapter, the 12th chapter, and I believe the 16th chapter, it clearly tells you that the Spartans are of the stock of Abraham. They're sons of Abraham. They were Israelites. All right? And that now, but Esau has, lied about that. So now they will put them in conflict with other white people, blacks in antiquity. And it talks about coloring varying from the reddish brown to deep brownish black, tightly curled and wiry described, woolly, frizzy, kinky, broad nose, thick lips, usually puffy and inverted prognathism, often marked at subnasal region. So reddish brown, color variant, reddish brown, that's your ruddy. All right? Because Memnon is referred to as being ruddy, but he's described as looking like this. All right? So that dark reddish brown, those reddish tones that you see in dark skin, like those men. See, those men are ruddy. King David was ruddy, meaning he was brown with those reddish tones. And more than likely, he was a lighter complected brown too. Then when the images were presented, they were presented like this. But when you go back to the time frame where these events took place, this was what was there. This is what was dug up. And who is thy sword? Who is the sword of thy excellency? And thine enemies shall be found liars.
I will bring you part 2 next week or throughout the middle of this week, possibly. Shalom. Family, hallelujah. May Yah bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine on you. May he be gracious, lift the light of his countenance, and give you peace. Subah Yahuwah Rev Alep Yasharel. And we just thank you for the music of our brother Elliston Stone. And I would ask you also, family, that
to the Most High Yahuwah, and giving thanks and praises.
Please go ahead and pick up Into All Truth, Moed Appointed Times calendar, or Chaya Eat Life and Fast to absorb the appointed times and also to support this ministry. You know that tithing is a command. I never ask for a whole tithe, but I do appreciate your support, and you have no idea how much it means to me, so I really thank you for it.
May all of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying hallelujah.